YouTube world, what's going on? Dan Larson, Realtor, right here, bringing you back with a great episode. And what we're going to talk about today is what I call the ultimate debate or the great debate. Talking about real estate, and that is renting versus buying or owning. I'm sure you've heard about this discussion before. If you ask an adult, they probably have a really one-sided opinion on what's the right call to either rent it or buy in most situations. So usually they only bring up one or two arguments or one or two pros or cons when talking about this. So since I'm a real estate professional, I wanted to dive into this with you guys and list the different pros for renting, the different cons for renting versus the different pros for buying or owning, and the cons for buying and owning. So let's dive right into it, guys. So what we're going to talk about first is the pros of renting. So the first pro we're going to talk about is flexibility. So flexibility is exactly what it sounds like. Usually your leases are a lot shorter than your time to own a home. So usually it's between 6 to 12 months, and you can have leases for less than 6 months, and you can have them for more than 12 months. But usually after every lease, there's actually a section in the lease, or the residential lease is what it's called, that talks about after the contract ends, if both sides are willing and able, that they will do a month to month basis. Basically, as long as the renter is paying and as long as the landlord is accepting the money of the agreed upon amount that they had with the original lease, then even though their contract ended, they'll pay on a month to month basis until one of them gives an advance notice saying, hey, you know, um, you're going to have to leave, or hey, I'm leaving. Usually it's between 30 and 60 days. That's also in the lease as well. So the next one that we're going to talk about is carefree. So you probably heard this argument for pro renters before, which is you don't have to pay for a roof, you don't have to pay for a water heater or septic, or if anything goes wrong while you live there, usually it's the landlord's responsibility to do that. Now, something that I will discuss that's kind of a negative that most people don't talk about is the fact that you have to wait on the landlord to either send someone out or come out himself. And sometimes you may have heard a horror story or two where that just takes way too long for them to come out, and the problem could get much worse. And there are those horror stories, but it is something to keep in mind about. Most people think that like pest control and snow removal are always the landlord's responsibility. Make sure you check into the lease. Sometimes that's your responsibility as the tenant. So watch out for that as well. But the water heater or the roof or something like that, that is definitely the landlord's responsibility to take care of, maintain, or update if things are broken. So that is definitely a plus because you don't have to hire contractors or fork out that money. The last positive that I'm going to talk about is predictable expenses. So that's essentially, exactly when you're signing the lease that it's going to be, let's say, $1,200 a month. Some things may change in terms of your insurance for rent, or the utilities that you use, if you have to pay for the water or the heat or the cooling or the electric or the Wi-Fi or stuff like that. That may change as time goes on, but that this is what you're going to pay for as long as the lease goes. Now, after the lease, if it's not a rent controlled area, which check before you sign the lease whether there's a rent controlled apartment or living space. And if it's not, if you're in a major city, some of the major cities around here, like Westchester, Exton, if you want to go to like Lancaster City as well, sometimes those rents can really jump up if, things are progressing that year and it's a lot more valuable. Your rent may increase as soon as that rent's over, and you may have to, knowing your lease is going to end, they may say ahead of time, hey, we're going to kick you out unless you agree to this new price. So that's something to keep in mind, and you can be a little proactive about. So let's go into the cons of renting. So the negative features of renting for a home. The first one is lack of control. I kind of talked about it before, where you have to wait on the landlord or the property manager who take care of the property instead of the landlord or contractor to come out and make those repairs. So that's not in your hands. All you can say is, hey, you need to fix this, and who knows how long it takes. So that could be an issue as well. But one of the major issues that I want to go into with lack of control is, there's usually a limit on how many people can live there in the apartment with you, how many people can visit at a time, maybe another one. There's usually a noise complaint could be problematic. Not a noise complaint, but if you're in an apartment complex, if you get too many noise complaints, you could get kicked out. So that's something to think about, guys, as well. What are you agreeing to with everything in the lease, and how can that be used against you? And it just kind of limits your freedom in the rental or your home that you're currently in. This is the major con for pro buy or own is no equity. When you're paying your rent each month, it's going to a landlord, and it's not going to benefiting you in terms of building equity in the house. Now, people will say, you're throwing away money. You're not throwing away money. In order to have a house or a roof over your head, in order to have heating and cooling, those are expenses that you have to pay for. When you're going to live on your own or with someone else, you have to pay for these things. So whether it's from an owning standpoint or a renting standpoint, they're both expenses you have to pay. So it's not you're not throwing away money. It's an expense you have to pay. And the last one I know is really important for people because pet controlled scenarios. And the reason why is so many people love their pets. I know I love my dog, and sometimes there's, sometimes they'll never allow a pet in that rental. Sometimes you can negotiate. If they do allow a pet, usually they have a breed restriction, a weight restriction, a limit on the number that you can have. They may have the cats have to be declawed. If you have like snakes or something like that, those are usually probably a no-go. And even if they allow that, majority of the time they charge an additional pet deposit you have to pay up front when you move in, or they charge you an increased rent amount because you own a pet. And sometimes they do both. So that's something to keep an eye out when you're looking for an apartment. And the reason why that is because landlords have different insurance policies, and some, the more aggressive dog breeds in particular are usually not included because their insurance won't cover that. And sometimes insurances will drop the landlord's coverage just because they found out that there is, a Rottweiler that the tenant owns and is living with. So, just so you can see it from a different standpoint. So we talked about the pros and cons of renting. Let's dive right into the pros and cons of buying. So we discussed it already. The equity is great because every principal payment that you make is going into more ownership or equity of your house. And realize I said principal payment. I didn't say mortgage payment. The reason why is a mortgage payment is divided into different categories. One of them is principal payments. Usually it's less when you first start any type of loan, not just mortgages, because it's more of interest payments at the beginning. And as time goes on, you're paying more and more principal with each payment, although it's the same amount, each time, as long as you're in a fixed loan. So just that will be different if you're in a different type of loan, but for fixed loans, it's going to be that same amount every time. And that equity that you can use, you could just hold it up, and when you save it, you get a decent amount back, or you can use that equity as well to either pay off other debts. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have to, you have to. Paying for child's education, paying for, updates to the house. These are all things that you can do with paying that principal each month as years go by. And it can really make a huge difference. It could send a kid to college and no one in that family has gone to college before. I've heard stories like that. It's just remarkable just because of owning a house and making those payments, what that can do. The next benefit that isn't really talked about that often, and before I go into it, I want to discuss it, guys. I am not a tax professional. I'm a licensed real estate agent, but I'm not a tax professional, okay? But this positive is tax benefits. You know, the things that you can deduct with owning a house. Those include your interest payments that I talked about that you make each month. You know, you can deduct that as long as you keep a record of how much interest you're paying each month. Talk with your mortgage company about that so you can track how much you're exactly paying each month or for that whole year, specifically about interest. And then you have your property taxes you have to pay with owning a house. You can deduct those as well. And for certain scenarios, you can deduct PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. So just check with a tax professional about that. You only have to pay a PMI if you're under 20% equity in a home. So if you're doing one of the first-time home buyers, it's only 3% down payment or sometimes 0% down payment. Next, we're going to go into is the last positive that I'll discuss for buying or owning a house, which is control. You have that control to do the updates that you want to the house, how many people you want to have over at one time, you know, how noisy you can be. Check with the township requirements, or if you're in a homeowners association situation, which would, you know, limit what you agree to and what you're going to follow. So just check on those things. But yeah, you can, you know, update your house accordingly and how you would like. So people like having control, so that's why sometimes owning is a better situation for them. But what we're going to talk about next is the cons or the negatives about owning or buying a house. So there's that renovations that we talked about, you know, that roof or the septic system going bad, or updates like that you either have to fix yourself or you have to pay and hire contractors to come out and fix, because that is your responsibility. And if you don't, you know, it's just going to make the situation a lot worse for you, your family, and the mortgage company that owns a majority of the equity in your house. So you're just going to have to do those updates, and you never really know when they're going to hit. I always say make sure you service them so you can at least be proactive about it, and knowing, hey, if things bad or things not. But that's something that you have to take time and money in order to make sure you are doing as time goes on. And some of those renovations, most of them don't bring you any higher value in the house. Just because you replace the roof doesn't bring more money. It just doesn't decrease money when people are writing offers. I talked about it before in a different video. I'm not going to go much further into it right now. So the next one we're going to talk about is that homes are illiquid. Essentially, they are not liquid assets in terms of the sense that, you know, when they're liquid, it's you can easily convert an asset into cash. Now, since it's not liquid, it's not easy to convert into a house. You know, you see my other videos about what it takes to buy a house, or I haven't done it yet, but what it takes to sell a house. You know, if you're really moving and grooving and have the right scenario for a buyer and everything happens, you can is pretty rare. But from the time you decide in your head that you're going to sell your house until you actually deliver the keys to a buyer and get the funds, the quickest usually is about 2 months. More predictably, it's about 3 to 5 months. And you know, longer situations, if you want to do more updates to the house, you know, if you're pricing your house high on purpose, you know, it could easily take 6 months or more in order to sell your house. So definitely not an illiquid, it's definitely an illiquid asset to own a house. So, and then houses are also susceptible to the market. So they're basically unsteady markets can really be a negative for a house. It's just kind of like a stock. If you don't put a lot of, for houses, if you don't put major repairs or updates to a house, it kind of is treated like a stock where, you know, it goes with how the market goes. And the market, if there's a lot of houses for sale at one time and it's a less desirable neighborhood, it's not going to sell for a lot of money. So people can lose a lot of, you know, from say they bought their house for $200,000 in 2010, they're trying to sell it in 2021, and you only sell it for $200,000 or less. It doesn't look good, but that's how unsteady markets happen. You know, if an employer leaves that area and people want to leave that area because they work for them, or what, they don't want to stay there anymore, that can really decrease the value of homes. It could also work in the opposite as well, and that's how people can make a lot of money from owning and selling a home, is because like in 2020, late 2020 and 2021, if you sell a house, you're usually making a good return as long as you kept up with the updates or made sure it didn't decrease in property condition. You can still get a pretty good return on your investment. So guys, that's all the pros and cons. So let me wrap up all the ones that I talked about so far. So for renting, the pros are flexibility, being able to leave in a short amount of time, carefree, you don't have to do the necessary repairs, predictable expenses, not much changes there. The cons are the lack of control, the fact that you're not building equity in a home and an asset that you own because it's not your asset, and the fact that you can't have the pets, the little furry friends that you guys have. The next is pros of buying, which would be equity, and then after that would be tax benefits. So talk with a professional about that. The third and last pro would be the control that you can have in terms of doing updates to your house, or having people over and having a good time. The cons would be having to do those renovations in terms of the roof or the septic system. It's an illiquid asset of owning a house, and the unsteady markets means you're not always having a great investment, and you're not getting a great return when you sell your house. So those are all the pros and cons. So guys, I am a little bit biased because I'm a real estate agent, but at the same time, I'm going to take my bias away and give you my summary of which the best decision is. You can do a little drum roll right now, but the best decision is there is no best decision. I know it's a horrible way to end this video, but the reason why is because there's a lot more than just the financial aspect of why renting or buying could be best for you. The reason why is there's a lot of pride and there's a lot of ownership with having your own home and taking control of that, or it just fits your lifestyle in terms of you like being out, being able to travel as much as you want, and you don't have to necessarily worry so much about things going wrong when you're leaving your home, and you don't have to have people take care of your house while you're gone. So really, the best option is what fits you best. Now, if you want to know exactly what options, or if buying's an option, or if renting is the option for you, please reach out to me. You can comment at me below, or you can go to my Facebook page as well. It's Dan Larson Realtor. You can go ahead and search for that, message me, and say, I'm looking to either rent or buy, and I can get you with the right parties, a mortgage lender if you're thinking about buying, or a credit repair specialist, because usually landlords have a minimum credit in order to rent out an apartment. So that's just something to think about, guys. So obviously, I prefer owning. That's my opinion of it, but really it only boils down to what fits you and your lifestyle. So guys, I really appreciate the fact that you clicked on another video, and I know that this is just an awesome video talking about the great debate, or the ultimate discussion, or ultimate debate of which is better, buying or renting. Now you have all the facts in order to make an educated decision to move forward with where you want to spend your time, in a rental or in a home that you own. So guys, please smash the likes on this video, subscribe to the channel. We bring out more content. And if you have any content that you want me to bring out, or discussions you want me to talk about, feel free to comment down below and say what that is, or comment what you learned in this video, guys. I appreciate everything that you guys do for me, and that's all I can say.